All right, let's dive into a really powerful idea from Dr. Steph Helfand's work that could honestly change the way you think about learning. It all comes down to one core principle. You can only apply at the level you understand. Have you ever had this happen? You spend hours practicing, you're just crushing the drills, you feel totally on top of it, and then the moment of truth arrives. The supports are gone, and poof, it's all gone. It's so frustrating, right? Well, it turns out it's not just you. There's a real scientific reason this happens. And this whole phenomenon has a name. It's called the fluency trap. It's the very reason that feeling of, I've got this, can be so deceptive. So let's break down why what looks, and even feels like real learning, so often isn't. Okay, so look at this. On the surface, you see what looks like mastery, right? A polished lab report, a perfect volleyball set. It looks amazing, but what's actually going on underneath? Well, that smoothness is often just being propped up by a bunch of temporary crutches. You had your notes open, you had a great teammate covering for you, or the drill was just super predictable. This quote just hits the nail on the head. That smooth, easy performance, it doesn't actually live in the learner's brain. It lives in the environment. So when you take away that supportive setting, the performance just collapses. Why? Because the knowledge was never really stable on its own. So what happens when we fall into this trap and push for complex tasks way too soon? The most important thing to get here is that this is not a failure of the learner. It's a design problem, and it comes with some serious hidden costs. You know, psychologists have a perfect name for this feeling, the illusion of competence. It's that false confidence, that high you get from performing really well with supports that, and this is the key, won't be there when it really matters. It feels great in the moment, but it's actually setting you up for a fall. And the costs are huge. I mean, think about all the wasted time and effort. It masks deep misunderstandings that don't get fixed. In a classroom, it can actually widen the gaps between students. And at the end of the day, it doesn't create real rigor, it just creates burnout. So, if that's the problem, what on earth is the solution? Well, we need a new mental model for learning. We need to stop thinking about performance and start thinking about building something that's truly stable. And we come right back to this simple, powerful idea. This is our anchor. Instead of rushing to do the fancy, complex thing, we have to make sure the foundation is rock solid first. Application isn't the start of learning, it's the proof of it. I love this metaphor from the source material. Think of learning like building a bridge. You can't just sprint across an open chasm, right? First, you have to build the main support beams. Those are your core concepts. Then, you have to stabilize that whole structure with focused, deliberate practice. Only when that bridge is solid can you confidently walk across it. That's application. Okay, so this stabilizing practice sounds great, but what does it actually look like? The good news is this isn't just a nice idea. It's backed by decades of cognitive science. So let's look at a few techniques that are proven to work. There are 3 heavy hitters here. First, worked examples. This is literally just studying problems that have already been solved for you. It frees up your brain to see the underlying patterns. Second is retrieval practice, actively pulling info out of your memory. It feels way harder than just rereading, but that struggle is what builds strong memory. And finally, interleaving, which means mixing up different kinds of problems. This forces your brain to learn when to use a strategy, not just how. Let's make this really concrete. How does this actually play out in a classroom? The source gives this great example of a 7th grade math team that was struggling to teach volume. So the old way they did it was a classic fluency trap. Jump right into a big hands-on project. Some students did okay, but a lot were lost, and the results were really uneven. So they flipped the script. The new way? They spent weeks building that foundation first with worked examples and tons of practice. The project came last. And here's the kicker. Even though the final project looked a bit simpler, the learning was way deeper and more consistent for everyone. And listen, this is not just about academics. The same exact principle applies everywhere. Let's take a look at the world of sports, volleyball. In practice, you might see players looking like superstars in what are called blocked drills, setting the same predictable ball over and over again. That's the illusion of competence right there on the court. But a smart coach will use interleaved drills, mixing up the speeds, the serves, the angles. Practice looks messier, there are more mistakes. But, and this is the amazing paradox, that struggle in practice is what builds a resilient skill that actually shows up in a chaotic real game. So, when we start to see the world through this lens, our whole approach to learning and teaching can shift. It leads to a totally different kind of rigor, one that's quieter, more deliberate, and, in the end, so much stronger. So, what really changes? Four things. First, how you see performance. A smooth result makes you ask, what support is making that possible? Second, how you design learning. You build the foundation first, then slowly fade the support. Third, you take small steps instead of giant leaps. And finally, and this is a big one, it changes the culture. The conversation shifts from who's behind to what's the next right move for this person. And the payoff for the learner is huge. When challenges are sized just right, people get to experience genuine, earned success. That doesn't just feel good, it builds true confidence, what psychologists call self-efficacy, and it fuels the motivation to keep going. This whole approach really asks us to rethink our goal. What if we shifted our entire definition of success? What if we stopped measuring how quickly someone can show something off and started caring about how deeply that knowledge has stabilized? And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. What if true rigor has nothing to do with how big and impressive a task looks? What if real rigor is about the precision of the fit, about designing the exact right challenge for the right person at the right time? Realizing that, well, that could change everything.